Do you understand the words that are coming out of my mouth?
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
Can we get serious now?
One thing that did happen during the 60s was some music of an unusual or experimental nature did get recorded and did get released. Now look at who the executives were in those companies at those times. Not hip young guys. These were cigar-chomping old guys who looked at the product that came and said, I don't know. Who knows what it is? Record it, stick it out. If it sells, all right. We were better off with those guys than we are now with the supposedly hip young executives who are making the decisions of what people should see and hear in the marketplace.
Success in the music business begins with a dream, a vision. This podcast will give you, the listener, the insight and tools to turn that vision into a reality. Meet the industry professionals who work day by day behind the scenes, helping to make those dreams come true. Welcome to the business side of music.
In the studio with us today here in Nashville, Tennessee, because where else would we be but Music City? Rachael Bronstein is joining us. She is an accredited financial counselor and financial coach. She got her start at NBC, the network, the Peacock, in production finance, and has since gone on to launch her company, Life's Jam, which we're going to talk about. You started it last year in response to the hardships that were created for the music industry due, obviously, to the pandemic, to the screeching halt that we all came to. So we're going to talk about that. Anyway, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to have you here. So you are in town. Where are you from originally? You're actually from an area of an artist I used to work with.
Yes, I'm from Holliston, Massachusetts, right outside of Boston.
Jody Messina territory.
Love her.
Yeah. And you're located where now?
I'm down in Miami, Florida.
Oh, almost God's country. The humidity's a bit much for me. But,
for me too.
Especially a girl from Massachusetts. So you got your start in the business how?
The business of music. Well, it sort of started when I was at NBC and started in production finance. I sort of got the bug to do a different side of finance. I was raised by a mom who was a financial planner and didn't want to go that way, and loved media. Got some awesome internships at Disney and the Associated Press, and always loved NBC and wanted to figure out how to kind of get in the door. And just like the music industry, the news industry is hard to get that first step. But that got me started with an appreciation for the production people that put on a show.
When you were working for NBC, was that New York or L.A.?
That was New York.
New York. Okay. So 30 Rock, that neck of the woods?
Yes. Well, I was located at MSNBC's office in Secaucus, New Jersey.
Okay.
I did production finance budgets for some of the shows at MSNBC and then moved over to the breaking news team and ran the budgets for breaking news.
How is that? That's a whole different world than what we normally talk about.
Yeah, and it was really exciting. As a 20-something-year-old, I was just thrilled to be part of it. And it wasn't long after that a whole bunch of news people decided to take advantage of the .com era and start a streaming news company online. And they took me over to New York City to start that up with them.
Let's back up even a little further. You said your mom was a financial planner and you didn't want to do that. You went to school to be what?
So I knew I loved business.
Yeah.
As a young adult, I thought marketing was my calling, and I started getting great grades in finance classes, which was not what I wanted to do. And financial planning would have been a good course, but I didn't really want to sell people investments. I was energetic and out there and loved media and wanted to find my own path.
Yeah, because we have a guest host on the show every once in a while, John Adams, who's with Money Concepts, and he's a financial planner. And when I read your bio, I went, okay, this really is two different worlds from what he does and what you do. And then you've gone on and formed this company, Life's Jam. Was that because of the pandemic, or was that something you were thinking about leading up into it?
Well, after I left New York for Miami, I moved to Miami for my husband's job and my family. And I had kind of put my family, my kids, my husband, and everybody first as a mom and kind of provider on the caring side and wanting to do for everybody else.
Right.
And I just got to a point in my life, I lost my college roommate due to cancer. And I said kind of like, what am I waiting for? I want to get back to something I love. And I had volunteered at music festivals, Tortuga, Key West Songwriters Festival for fun. I loved the music and wanted to stay involved. And when the pandemic happened and put a halt to kind of my happy place, my vice to get away from it all, I was really heartbroken for the people behind the show. I thought the artists would find a way to make it, but I was really worried about all those people that put that show on and wanted to do something.
Did you have any kind of a music background yourself? Did you play an instrument, or was it always just the ones and the O's?
I did not play an instrument other than fifth grade band class when I played the flute.
Yep.
But no, it was really just my love for the music and the people. And I had always kind of been a people connector. And so when COVID happened and I wanted to help, I looked up the people I had met at the festivals and asked them if they had 15 minutes to talk to me and see if there was a problem I could solve to help out.
Yeah, because we talk about this a lot on the show, and that is finances. And when we talk about people in the music business, and I say this a lot, and some people agree and some people don't, left brain versus right brain. One of them is very analytical, one of them is very creative, and very rarely do the two coexist happily, at least on a conscious level, maybe even on a subconscious level. When we talk about artists, touring professionals, session players, the person that's on the stage, a lot of them don't think about the day-to-day finances. And once again, this is different than investing. This is, I'm on the road and I'm making great money. And look, I'm the poster child for that, okay? You make a lot of money and then the tour ends. And then what do you do? Is that something that you saw when you mentioned there are some problems? Let's see if I can figure them out. Is that one of them?
100% that's a problem. And actually, when I was talking to the touring career workshop last night, one of the things I said was, this is when I want to get the message to you during the slower months so that when you go on tour and you start to make good money over the summer, at the end of the summer, you still have something to show for it. Because even though income goes up and down in this industry, you don't have to live your life like that. You can plan on a steady basis. If you know you need X dollars a month to pay your expenses, if you make more than that, that goes in savings. You're setting yourself up so you can live every month how you need, and it doesn't matter when the income comes in. You change your framework in your mind.
That's an easy message to get across. How well does it actually stick when you talk to these people? And you mentioned you were at the touring workshop here in Nashville last night. You spoke to them. What was the response of the people in attendance?
Well, it was amazing. They actually had to move me into a bigger room because so many people signed up. I couldn't believe it. At 9:00 at night, and my session was going against mental health, which is another huge problem in this industry and in the country. So I was just so happy to see so many people wanting to learn more. I think a lot about it is setting new habits and being mindful of it. I think it's really easy to spend for all of us. And I think unless we track it, unless we look at it, unless we kind of put the power back in our seat, we can be empowered by the money we make. We work really hard. These guys work really hard for the money. And all we have to do is set up a plan and make some minor tweaks and changes about the way we spend rather than just spending without thinking. So building in triggers and knowing your triggers and building in some new habits. And that's the message I was trying to get across.
I know that in my day on the road, my years that I spent touring back then, and we're talking the mid to late 80s into the mid 90s and early parts of 2000, it was a lot of cash and carry. You basically said, this is how much I want a month, and the powers that be, in many aspects, would be a business manager, not an artist manager, would write you a check, either once a week or once a month, and then it was your job to file all the taxes and, the 1099 and the Schedule Cs and keep all the receipts to all your expenses. Is that something that you're seeing that still goes on? Obviously, it's a topic of discussion that, if it is, still needs to be discussed, and these people need to be educated to a certain extent. I know that when we talk about side gigs, whether you're an Uber or Lyft driver or DoorDash or whatever, and I see comments all the time from people going, I didn't know I was supposed to track my mileage or keep my receipts, and I didn't know I had to pay quarterly. Do you see that same issue? We'll call it that. Do you see that same issue in the music business?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
70% of the industry is freelancers. So the thing that even if you're technically a W-2, an employee for a tour, it's just the taxes that are taken out. There's no benefits or retirement. You know, when you go work at a big company, the HR professional says, here's your benefit package.
Right.
Here's all these things we offer you, and we're going to walk you through how to do it. We're going to make it easy for you. Oh, and by the way, here's your retirement plan. And we give money. You give money, we give money. The freelance world and in the music industry, I don't see that.
Right.
So I'm hoping to kind of give them the playbook so that they can make those decisions. Because right now what I see happening is they're sort of winging it. They're asking a friend of a friend. They don't always get the proper guidance, and estimated taxes came up last night too. Like, I know it's no fun, but I want you to get paid and move that tax money into a savings account labeled taxes, like out of sight, out of mind. And I think that if you can set up some of those automations, I think that by the time summer touring comes, maybe you'll have a plan. Maybe you'll do a little better. You'll get those dates down that you need to pay. Because why do you want to pay penalties and late fees? There's certain things you just don't self-sabotage. Let's set you up for success.
I love that, self-sabotage, because we seem to be able to do that quite successfully in this business.
Yes.
On many levels. In the studio with us here today in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table from me is Rachael Bronstein.
Hi, this is Vale Johnson, bass player for myself, and you're listening to the business side of music.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Hey friends, this is Dr. Garrett Hope. I am a speaker, coach, and composer. I am also host of the Portfolio Composer podcast and founder and executive director of the Ultimate Music Business Summit. The third annual Ultimate Music Business Summit is a 3-day virtual conference that'll be held on January 5th, 6th, and 7th, 2023. This 3-day virtual event features over 24 speakers to help you build your music business. As a musician, you care about your art. You want to make a difference in your community and in the world. You want to pass your knowledge on to your students. And you want to do more than trade your time for money and just get by every month. UMBS is all about the one thing you didn't learn in music school, realizing that you are a business. It offers dozens of ways to build a career as an independent musician, including marketing, copywriting, studio development, mindset, money, and networking opportunities. Whether you're a composer, touring musician, studio teacher, recording artist, or professor, UMBS is for you. Get your ticket now at musicsummit.biz.
As a musician, you have a dream, that vision of what success looks like for you. Though it's not only about the money, money is part of it. Whether you've been extremely successful or you're just striving to maintain a regular cash flow, you need a plan. Money Concepts can help you develop a customized plan to achieve the financial stability and success you want. For over 40 years, Money Concepts has been providing holistic financial planning services to individuals, families, and business owners. As an independent firm, Money Concepts and their associates are committed to always represent the best interest of the client. It's really about a committed, benevolent interest in them personally. This independence, coupled with that committed, benevolent interest, means they represent you, the client, not a product supplier. It's not about selling products, it's about helping you achieve success. To learn how this can benefit you, contact my buddy, John Adams, with Money Concepts at 737-867-9309. That's 737-867-9309. You can also email John at jadams@moneyconcepts.com.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table from me, Rachael Bronstein, who is with Life's Jam, and we're going to talk about that company. But during the break, you mentioned to me about a roadie. And in fact, one of the things you said were some people that came up to you and mentioned, where were you 25 years ago? And that's I still think we have an ongoing problem here. It's an ongoing issue when we talk about, and once again, we're not talking about financial planning. We're not talking about investing. We're talking about just being on the road, performing, and the tour ends and having money to continue to live on, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We're talking about financial wellness, which is budgeting and managing debt and having something for retirement, not where to invest that retirement. That will leave to the financial planners.
Right.
But having money basics and understandings for building your best self.
Yeah, and that's why we have guys like John Adams on the show for Money Concepts. We talk about that type of scenarios. But let's for a moment discuss this shall remain nameless roadie that came up to you. And that's another part of the industry that people don't think about, especially the consumer that goes to the show or the layman. They don't understand that for every artist, for every musician that's on stage, there's 2 or 3 people behind the scenes every single day building this thing up and tearing it down, building it up and tearing it down. And that's where your story comes from, is one of these roadies.
Yeah, this roadie came to me last year, troubled with high interest credit card debt, student loan debt, a car loan of 13%, taxes owed to New York State from touring back in his 20s that he hadn't dealt with. And
those don't go away.
Correct.
Let's just, you can file bankruptcy all day long and taxes are still taxes. You got to pay the tax,
student loan debt too.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And he came to me and he said, Rachel, I'm ready to adult up. So
that's when you know they're serious, when they say they're ready to adult up.
Right. So and the other problem that happens sometimes is when you don't get organized, take a pause. You're so scared to deal with it, right? So you don't want to open the envelope from the debt collector or whatever, because out of sight, out of mind. But just opening that, embracing it, forgiving yourself and saying whatever happened in the past happened, but I'm going to make my next step positive is so important. So getting him organized, writing all his debt down, figuring out which debt to pay back first, making a payback plan with New York State. And then sometimes what happens is they try to solve a problem by creating another problem. So he was thinking about taking a second mortgage on the home to pay off the debt. But then if you default on that, then they can take your home. So kind of getting help and support so you're not doing it alone, getting information and not panicking.
In fact, I know that an acquaintance of mine, a friend of mine, who has a family member who is a pretty good-sized rock star in the industry. Same situation, and that was due to just some bad management skills. Turns out he owed about 6 figures to the IRS. And once again, the IRS does not go away. And they want some type of a payment plan presented to them rather quickly, or they'll present the payment plan. And that one's pretty painful. So you can get ahead of those things?
Absolutely. For him on the New York State tax issue, he had a payment plan put in place with that. On the credit card problems, we itemized all the credit cards, the balances, the interest rate, which is really important to know. And we put them in order because you need to make more than the minimum payment to actually make a dent.
Yeah.
But when I calculated it all, I said, even with this plan, it's going to be hard. Let's call American Express and see if they'll reduce your rate. And they reduced it from 29% to 8% for a year and a half.
Oh, my gosh.
Yep. Just by having a money script and being able to call that credit card and saying, I'm working with a financial counselor. I want to pay this back. Can you guys help me out and reduce the rate?
So at the beginning of this conversation, we mentioned that you created this company, Life's Jam, out of the effect of the pandemic. And I'm assuming that's correct. That's how this all kind of came about. Because the pandemic did something that we have never seen in the history of the music industry. And as I may have said earlier, that was bringing it to a screeching halt literally overnight. We had a tour manager on the show a couple years ago who, now here in Nashville, we're tornado country, okay? So he was on the road in South America with an act from Spain when COVID hit and they shut everything down. And he literally overnight had to figure out how to get his entourage back to Spain before they shut those doors, closed the borders. And then he had to get back to the United States. And in the process of all that, we had a tornado that came through here. I mean, it literally 4 blocks from our house.
Oh, my gosh.
And took out his storage unit where he had all of his life's belongings just, wiped out. We don't want to see things like that. But that's kind of what we were dealing with on the 10th degree here in Tennessee. But to take out the tornado effect, you still had entertainers, you still had roadies, you still had record label executives, television people to a certain extent, especially if they were on the road, who now all of a sudden, and here's the deal, you're a roadie for a band or you're a touring artist, you can't work out of your house. I mean, God bless people like Keith Urban and a few of the others who did these live streaming,
right?
From wherever. But there's literally thousands of people that couldn't work. How did you address that? And you started this company because of that.
Yeah. I mean, I started it by asking my contacts from the festivals. I said, does anyone need help applying for PPP loans? I had successfully completed 2 PPP loans for a business I was working at, and realizing that even in finance, there was a lot of things to navigate in those forms, and understanding and making sure you got your backup in. And the lighting guy that I talked to, he said, Rachel, the problem's so much bigger than the loans. They haven't filed their taxes. And I was like, oh my goodness. So I started. I decided that I became an accredited financial counselor during that. At the same time of launching Life's Jam, I talked to Jean Chatzky, who I'd always admired from my days at NBC. She's a financial editor on the Today Show for 25 years. And I loved the way she talked about money. She broke it down into easy to digest pieces, which I thought would be very relatable for people in music. It doesn't have to be at a high level with words we don't understand. This can be communicated in a way that anyone can take action on it. And that's what I wanted. I wanted to get to everyone and empower them to make choices to help themselves for now and the future. Because I hated what I saw when the live event stopped, and I wanted better for them. Not that anyone's emergency fund we would never have known, right? We wouldn't have had an emergency fund for 2 years, right. But I still wanted better.
When you talk about the PPP loans, okay. When you talk about those, fortunately, I didn't have to do something like that. But those entities out there, was that immediate relief, or was there still downtime before that money hit your bank account?
Those loans, those were grants that could be forgiven.
Okay.
There were, rules. But when they opened it up to independent contractors, it opened it up to a lot more people. And because
they didn't initially offer it to independent contractors, did they?
I don't think so,
Yeah.
But it was listen, they were sort of a hot mess. Like how they started, and then the banking institutions couldn't keep up.
Right.
So it was kind of a race.
But also at the same time, it was really unknown terra firma. Nobody had gone down that path before doing this.
Right. That was just sort of the launching point to realize that there was a problem and that maybe I could solve it. And I wasn't even sure what even financial coaching was until I met up with Jean, and she had launched a program called Finance Fix. And I said, oh, do you need some coaches? And so she had recommended this program for getting accredited. So I got accredited and I started teaching her coaching classes. And I realized financial coaching is actually what I love and I'm good at. And I could take all those skills that I was doing for Jean and transfer them over to the music industry, because I understood the nuances of the industry. People kept saying, we want somebody that understands our industry.
Because it is so totally different than any other industry in the world.
Right. And the other problem is that even when you're on a tour, if you're off that tour, then you don't really, you don't belong to anyone. There's no one looking out for you.
There is really no trade association for roadies. I mean, there's different entities and workshops like you attended last night. To have an actual bona fide trade association looking out for the interests of roadies, I don't know if it exists. And if it does, I'd actually like to get those people on the show to talk about it. But,
right.
Yeah,
One organization that's amazing that I connected with is the Roadie Clinic. They're amazing humans that are building a space in Michigan to support roadies, all different kinds of problems that go on. And And they've sent me some roadies that have needed help that I've been able to help.
That's good. We might want to get their information and post it on the show. So let's talk about Life's Jam. You started it because of the pandemic. It kind of launched out of that. What is Life's Jam? What are the services that you have to offer?
Sure. So right now I provide one-on-one coaching, but I'm hoping through speaking engagements and interest that organizations that are out there supporting the music industry might be interested in providing these services. So there's a lot of grant money that's been out there and continues to be out there to help musicians or people in the industry in need. But while I love that, I want to get to the root of the issue. I don't want to just put a Band-Aid on it. I want to help you change your life so you can make different decisions, so you can set yourself up for success.
When you talk about one-on-one coaching and those life-changing decisions, each person is their own entity. You're not talking about cookie-cutter templates here. How difficult of a road is that to travel when you get these individuals, especially, once again, someone who's used to making a lot of money while they're on the road, and now all of a sudden they're not on the road? Those types of habits, we'll call them that, those types of habits, how easy is that to change, adjust, insert whatever word seems to fix there? Because you really are trying to fix something.
Right. And usually, unfortunately, people find me when they're having problems.
Yeah. It's almost too late.
Right. So doing things like last night, I'm trying to get the word out to get the information into the industry's hands before they have to go down that road.
Ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, high interest rate debt can be as high as 30%.
Right.
On your every balance that you carry. So like teaching people that how to kind of properly manage debt and not rack up the high interest credit card debt and spend within your means. I know it all sounds great in theory, but the way that one of the strategies for doing that is building up that emergency savings, because if you do have that next emergency, you're not putting it on the credit card unable to pay it back. So when we talk about paying back debt, if you're carrying debt, we also talk about using some of your money to put in that emergency savings at the same time. Otherwise, you never get off the hamster wheel. So
it becomes a vicious cycle. And vicious is probably quote unquote.
Yeah, it really does. But one way we get down with the spending is we start tracking it. That's something I do with the Jeans coaching, and it's something that I've taken into this coaching as well. We don't make budgets out of thin air. Like, I think I'm going to spend this, or I think my expenses are this. Let's look at your last 2 to 3 months. Let's look at your last year of income, or go a couple years back on the income side and see what you've made. But you really have to understand your spending, because I think we spend without thinking and putting in kind of pauses. So do you spend a lot on Amazon? Do you find that you need a new piece of equipment and you buy new and you don't even consider used?
Why are you looking at me when you say that?
It seems to be a popular one for people.
If I don't get enough grief from my wife, now I'm getting it from you. But you're right. It adds up. Oh, you do a little bit here and a little bit there. And before you know it, it's like, that was a lot of money I just spent.
Right. Or Uber Eats or takeout. And touring, everything is convenience, right? You're on the road. You need to pay for things while you're out there. Or sometimes we feel like certain money doesn't count. So I feel like a lot of...
Like your per diem.
Yes.
That money that you have to live on while you're out on the road.
Or Venmo. Venmo is a deep, dark hole because you can just do transactions back and forth, especially for younger people. And you feel like you have a balance in your Venmo account. You feel like it's free money. You're like, oh, no problem. I'll Venmo you. So I actually recommend Zelle as another option for paying people electronically, because Zelle will create a transaction every time we have an exchange. So it will show up in your bank account each time, rather than Venmo, where it's a Venmo balance that kind of goes back and forth.
Yeah, because it's, once again, if you don't see it, you don't think about it. Right.
That's why tracking is huge.
So when you take a client on with Life's Jam and you go back and you look at their budget or their lack thereof or their income, let's just say they're so totally organized. Back in the days, we'd always say, I keep my expenses in a Kinney's shoebox. Kinney's was a shoe store chain out on the West Coast. And, you bought a pair of shoes and you kept the box and you threw all your receipts. It's not quite that simple anymore, is it? But where do you start? I mean, how do you get started? Especially, as I just said, if you don't have something to show what you've done over the last 3, 6 months or a year, what do you do to help get them started?
First thing is you need a system. I don't care what your system is. If you're pen and paper, if you like Excel, if you like a budgeting app, whatever you think you can stick with, but just being accountable to yourself, having it and making a time once a week to look at it. So I started this accountability group on Tuesdays on Zoom. It's free. You can just show up and get finance stuff done. You needed to call the utility company to negotiate a rate. You needed to deal with a credit card bill that you haven't dealt with. Just show up. We'll set a timer. Everybody will work on their stuff. I'm there to answer questions if anybody needs guidance, because sometimes people just need that person that's there saying, you got this. You just have to make time for it. And these kinds of things we don't make time for all the time.
In the studio with us here today in Nashville, Tennessee, sitting across the podcast table, is Rachael Bronstein with Life's Jam.
This is your boy DC, the brain supreme of Tag Team, and you're listening to the business side of music. Whoop, there it is.
You're listening to the business side of music.
When you have a Korg synth at your fingertips, the possibilities are endless. Be it digital, analog modeling, altered FM, wave sequencing, or the multi-engine synth, Korg gives you easy access to a variety of features to help you get the perfect sounds quickly. Whether you're a professional musician or just starting out, Korg truly has a synthesizer to help you express yourself. Visit Korg.com or your favorite Korg dealer to get your hands on one of their products to create new music always. Korg, the official sponsor of the business side of music.
Whether you consider yourself a musician or not, music is all around us, and it affects our everyday lives. Whether it's background music influencing our shopping habits in a store, organ music adding the vibe to a baseball game, or a playlist convincing us to keep going on that last mile of a run. I'm Mindy Peterson, host of the podcast Enhance Life with Music, where we take a holistic look at music's benefits through the lens of science and medicine, entertainment, and business. You can find me and Enhance Life with Music at mpetersonmusic.com/podcast or wherever you get your audio.
You're listening to the business side of music.
Back in the studio here, Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA. Rachael Bronstein is sitting across the table from us. She's with Life's Jam. And I love what you are doing because we said it before. I personally am someone that could have used you in my life 15, 20, 25, 30 years ago. Back in the days, when I started, we carried a notepad and a roll of quarters. We didn't have laptops back in those days. You didn't get your messages until you got to the hotel or you got to the venue. That's just how we did business back then. The touring industry did not really evolve in that aspect until probably the mid to late 90s. We didn't start carrying cell phones and laptops until about that time. You've come in at a perfect opportunity to help people with Life's Jam. But you mentioned something during the break. It's you handed out Sharpies.
Well, first of all, who doesn't need a Sharpie at a concert? But it came with a keychain. I want everyone out there to wear it. And then when they're on the road and they have a receipt that they realize they could deduct, they give that date a little circle with a Sharpie and write who they had the meal with or what they purchased that they needed for their business. Take a quick picture of it. There's scanner apps that will save it directly into a folder called Receipts, and you really get in the habit of getting organized.
Which, once again, is that key word we're using here is organization. When we talk about Life's Jam, you're not doing this for free. It is a service, so there is a cost involved. What is that? Let's talk about that for a minute.
Sure.
Let's go down that rabbit hole.
Sure. Actually, I totally believe in pay transparency because I feel that we all need to value ourselves and show our worth, and that it's important to talk about. I hear one of your other episodes, there was actually people talking about that they didn't know how to price their services because nobody's kind of willing to share.
Yeah.
My services are $125 an hour, and I can usually show people after the 6 sessions together that we've already saved that amount of money just by the tweaks and the attention to detail and the tracking. So many times we pay for stuff we don't even know is on our statement. Subscriptions, or we see the grocery total with inflation right now, it's out of control. And when we make a plan to cut some of that back and you actually see that starting to happen, those are things you can carry past our 6 weeks together.
You just brought up something that's interesting, and that is when we talk about subscriptions, my wife gets magazines in the mail and she looks at me and goes, I don't remember subscribing to this magazine, but now I've got a renewal notice. Or I look at our bank statement and I go, oh, we're paying so much a month for Netflix and Hulu and Sling and Disney Plus and Discovery. And you're like, after all, going, this is all adding up, and you don't realize it. It's those bits and pieces. Is that something that you help your clients over that? Is it a 6-week period or a 6-episode period? How does that work?
Sure. It's 6 sessions.
Okay.
So in touring, some weeks are busier than others.
Right.
So I'm very flexible how we cover that. But I give little homework assignments or recaps in between each session. So I'm working with a sound engineer right now, and he was on a gig. And so we took a couple breaks, but he had things that he needed to do. And then once he comes back and he has some downtime here in Nashville, he signs up for the next session so we can move on to the next step.
I'm assuming starting is the biggest step. That has probably got to be the hardest step, is picking up the phone, admitting that you have a problem. Yes, I spend way too much on Amazon. Help me. At what point over that 6-session course does it start kicking into them?
I think once they start to see the savings, realizing what they're spending is the first step, but then making those small changes, getting your annual credit report, seeing if there's something on your credit report that then that data in there affects your credit score. And your credit score is the kind of thing you don't need it until you need it.
Right.
But then when you need it, you really need it. So
well, it's like you mentioned the one roadie who had a car loan of 13%.
Yeah.
You know, they're just about giving away car loans these days.
Yeah, it's changing a little bit, but yes.
Because of inflation and such. But still, I mean, 13% is kind of, that's top tier.
It's
or
terrible.
Or maybe I should say bottom tier. That's pretty high.
Yeah. And why? Like, all we have to do is understand why that's happening and that we don't want to be in that position again, because it really does make a difference. So to anyone younger that's listening who says it doesn't really matter now, or I'm living the life.
Oh, trust me, it does matter.
It matters.
Yeah.
It matters. And when you need it, you need it. And then also for younger people, utility bill. Sometimes employers will check your credit. Utilities, sometimes you have to put deposits down. So really, all of these things are interconnected, and we didn't even get to talk about it, but financial health is so tied to mental and physical health, and touring, mental and physical, get beat up.
Well, and you mentioned that while you were doing your workshop, there was another one that was dealing with mental health. And a lot of people don't understand that, especially during the pandemic. Mental health was tough because you lose your sense of who you are. You lose your sense of well-being because you're no longer working. And not just the music business. I mean, everybody was fighting that, sitting at home staring at the walls. But in the music business especially, because it's such an adrenaline rush, you know, each night, especially when you're that guy behind the scenes, you're the guy or gal backstage, and the lights go out and the crowd cheers. You get that sense of accomplishment. Now all of a sudden you've lost that.
Right.
So now not only do you not have the income, but now you don't have that, what am I worth?
Right.
And so is that something that you can help point them in the right direction in the process?
Oh, for sure. And there's a lot of great organizations on the mental health side that are here to support the industry. But I think recognizing that the mental component and the physical component of having health insurance and going for checkups and all of those things, being healthy leads to less financial worries also. Because when we're stressed and we're anxious, And then we have physical illness, which then costs us money because so many are uninsured.
Right.
There's an amazing speaker last night from the Music Health Alliance who talked about just the healthcare advocacy work that they do for the music industry, which is a great resource also.
Yeah, and I think that's something that is so important to understand, especially our younger listeners, is not only having a financial plan in place, but also having a health plan in place. Because I remember years and years ago, I was on the road. I did not have health insurance. I was probably in my late 20s, early 30s. I was 10 feet tall and bulletproof.
I know.
And then all of a sudden, I came down. I got bit by a brown recluse spider.
Oh, wow.
And the next thing I know, I'm in the hospital from that and no insurance. Now, all of a sudden, I'm not touring and, oh, yeah, I've got all these hospital bills. It's very tough. Yeah, and it's something that I think needs to be addressed all the time.
Right. And people just need to remember that medical debt is a number one cause of bankruptcy in America.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of a rule of thumb that people go by is if you wouldn't want the worst case scenario of taking on that risk of not having health insurance, then you probably should get the insurance. So if you're a freelancer and you're running a business and you have gear and you can't afford to lose that gear if it's lost or stolen, you probably should protect it.
Yeah, have insurance on it.
Yeah.
Well, your body's the same way.
Right.
And as your financial health. So let's talk about how can people get in touch with you?
Sure. I'm most active on LinkedIn and on Instagram Life's Jam. And my website is www.lifesjam.com. And I'd love to hear from everyone.
Very good. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
The Business Side of Music is the creation of Tom Sabella and Tracy Snow and is produced by Bob Bender. The Business Side of Music is recorded at Music Dog Studios in Nashville, Tennessee. Production sound design by Keith Stark. Voiceover and promo by Lisa Fuson.